Yes, 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 yes. You know, he's going to actually do another vlog right here, you know, on black people owning black slaves. You know, we hear a lot of memes about, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. There was this black guy, and he was the first, he owned black slaves. You know what I mean? The black man owned black slaves, you know, African. And then it comes African. Stop your lying. Stop your lying on this so-called African thing. Right? So we're going to do a next video. Like I said, the video was going to be called something to the effect of the working title was like black people who own black slaves. Because we was checking out this thing where they talk about Oluda Equiano. I think he had another name, Gustavus, something like that. You know, his legal so-called Slav. And where's Slav come from? Where the slave come from the word Slavic? Nobody want to address that. Remember Rasiadonis Tafari, been telling you about that over like 20 years on the tube. Maybe some people can't understand it. Maybe, you know, we haven't, you know, made that point quite clear. That Slav come from Slavic, right? There's a difference between Slav and slavery, right? Difference between slavery, what they call slavery, and servitude. And bondmen and bondwomen. There's a big difference. This term slavery is a very unique so-called peckerwood cracker or white man. You call a white man thing. But we're going to do a next video, right? Going to do a next video. But then we came across something like, so I was checking this out. You see what it says right here? So black Africans sold other black Africans. Stop your lying. The content was called Ethiopia at the time, 1600s, right? And Africa was not even a name they was naming until like later on, like even some of the maps around the 1800s, you know, some of the maps still said Ethiopia, Upper Ethiopia, Lower Ethiopia. Then they call it Negro land, you know. So, you know, people want to tell us now, oh, Africans were sold in that. Stop your lying. Stop your lying. See, here's what they do. They move the line, you know, like the goalposts. You know what I mean? They move the line, you know, like it's like back that old cartoon. Remember that old cartoon where don't cross this line. Don't cross this line. So the line will be made in the sand and then erase that line and then draw a new line. Or don't cross this line. Or don't cross this line. This is what they be doing. And like my earthly father said, you know, some black people, some black men, I got to talk to the Mandem, right? It's the Mandem that protect the nation. If there's any nation, then what about the Mandem, right? You know, poor thinkers. You know, we still talking about, yeah, they're enslaved Africans. Excuse me? They wasn't even using the terminology African at the time. They was not, stop that. See, once you start to do that, then as hello Sister Mariano Tene, you know, then like, you know, any number can play. Once you start doing that, any number can play. Once you start removing the goalposts, you know, like calling this, that, and that this, when at the time this was this and that was that. Can we talk about this being this and that being that at the time in the context? See, they take a lot of this out of context, and we wonder why we be talking about, you know, people be talking about this slavery thing and black people in America, and we keep going round and round. Like that movie, you're going to go round and round. What we have here is a failure to communicate. Was that Cool Hand Luke? Was that movie there, that Robert Redford movie? You know, what we have here is a failure to communicate. So we're going to shift right here, pivot. We're going to pivot right here. Got to pivot right here. We're going to follow up hopefully with that video about, you know, black people owning black slaves. Because some people, they hear this idea, oh, look at that, black people own black slaves. I can't believe that black people did that to themselves. Stop it for a moment. Stop it for a moment. Because you're taking things out of context. Taking things way out of context. You know, because they talk about this guy, Anthony Johnson. He was the first black African, the first African. They talk on this and they say black African. I thought Africans were black. Now they say black African. See how they keep moving the line? See how they keep moving the line? So look at this. Look what it says right here. So black Africans sold other black Africans as slaves. Stop it. Black Africans? Are you What are you, Afrikaner? Are you Dutch or something? In South Africa, you trying to support that whole that cloak and dagger down there. So black Africans. I have to say, well, there's white Africans. You see how they do this? You see how they do that right there? You didn't even peep that. So black Africans sold other black Africans. Where we show you the map. We show you the map from the time. We go back to the 1600 maps, the 1700 maps, the 1800 maps. And then it's really more fully in the 1900 maps where they start to call the continent that was once called on their maps Ethiopia, they start to call it Africa. So, if at the time of the transatlantic slave trade, the Atlantic Ocean was called the Ethiopian Ocean, why can't we call it what it was? The Trans-Ethiopian Ocean Slave... Because once you start to do that, people start to, it starts to jar their mental cogs and their mental wheels in other ways, direction, and then you have a whole different... It's something to deal with. So let's just read this. Let's read this meme right here. Right? So misleading, a lot of these memes, you know what I mean? They appeal to the grand silliness of a lot of us. And sometimes I read these memes like, yeah, that's right. And I think about it, wait. So black Africans? So you mean, so white Africans didn't sell other white Africans? In fact, they done it. They done did it. So black Africans sold other black Africans as slaves all over the world. And in America, free blacks own over 10,000 black slaves. My goodness. So misleading, this disinformation, right? We're going to fact check it. Why do we never hear about this in the media? In almost every state, including South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Louisiana, free blacks own as many as 10,000 slaves. They love that term, slave. Before the white man's thing, that term Slav was not even used. There was a term servant, right? You could be a servant, right? Like an employee, and there was a term like bondman, bondwoman, bond servant. There was servant and there was bond servant. Like you have a servant who serves you like an employee, and then you have somebody that you have to put chains on, put hands on. You have to deal with them with rigor, brutality. There's a big difference, but people never even get into that right there, right? They don't even touch on that right there. They don't look at the details. They say the what? The Diablos, Ha-Satan, right? Is in the what? In the details. So pay attention to what they're saying. So black Africans. So you could tell who probably wrote this. You could tell who probably did this up. Let's go to this one. The first American to own slaves was a black man. Woo! Notice the highlight part. He was the first to hold a black African slave. You hear that? Do you hear that? But at the time, here's the point. At the time, like nearly 400 years ago, that is not the terminology they were using. Right? In other words, black Africans were not sold into slavery. You know who was sold into slavery? If you have to get the name they were using. Negroes. I looked at this right here. I said, okay, look at it. Anthony Johnson was an Angolan. He was an Angolan, really. He was an Angolan. Was it called Angola? Can we look at the map? When was this? About 1620. Right? He was held as an indentured servant by a merchant in the colony of Virginia in 1620. Can anybody get a map of the 1600s? Can you find Angola on that map of the 1600s? And what was the continent of that they call today Africa? What was it called? But I know, so they say it's not good enough to say the African. He was the first to hold an African servant. No, they can say African. They had to say black African servant. And before South Africa came into view, the cracker Africana, South Africa, there was no talk about black African, white African. See what they're not pointing to. See, it's like you say one thing, and then it's the cognitive dissonance. Then it's what's goes below the radar. You know, when you see black African, you think, well, if there's a black African, you know, why we have to distinguish the African? Now Africa is not just black anymore because everybody came from Africa, so we all African. Cut your bull. Cut that. Maybe not bullshit. Cut your human shite. That bullshit is good for some things. Bullshit is good if you're on the farm and everything. You should know that the nitrates in the bullshit is very good, right? It's that human shit that's toxic, right? He was the first to hold a black African serving as a slave in the mainland American. Look, they say mainland American. Why don't they say mainland white American? Why don't they say that he was the first to hold a black African servant as a slave in the mainland white American? How about the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant? It's not we black people that made that up. We didn't make that up, right? WAS. What does WAS stand for? White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And see, as we said this before, we'll say it again. When you hear that, you got to think, wait, if they were white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, by them saying it like that, they couldn't just say Anglo-Saxon Protestant. If everybody was just Anglo-Saxon, but they distinguish it to say white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, that made me think that, there must have been black Anglo-Saxon. The other half of the story. See, they keep you running around on this stuff so they can cover up that stuff, right? So they say he was the first to hold a black African. See, they're trying to get your feelings, your emotion. A black, what? A black? Because you see the word black referred to black, and you think African referred to black too. So therefore you think black African is like double. Serving as a slave. Not even as a servant, but as a slave. My goodness, right? In the mainland what? American. It's not the white American. Wasn't the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants that came over here? Study the history. Study their own history, the old books. The old books will tell you the truth. They never used that term African. Like it was called the Ethiopian Ocean around the time. So how all of a sudden when Ethiopian Ocean, right? But then only in the 1900s did they change the name. See, they changed the name in the 1900s, then they went back and rewrote history. So what you're getting is some factual evidence, some factual things, but covered over by a rewrite. A lot of this is a rewrite. He was a black man, the first American to own slaves. Really? So you're saying that he was the first American to own slaves? And y'all believe this stuff. After all, you know, he writes the books, right? He writes the books. Upon his death in 1670, a court ruled, hear this right here. Here's how they catch you and you never see it. Upon his death in 1670, what did the court rule? A court ruled that he was, quote, a Negro. He was a what? He wasn't a black man. He wasn't an Angolan. Right? He wasn't American. He wasn't African or a black African. But in 1670, that's the language they used back then. That's the language they used back then. Negro. So you hear these people say, oh, they sold Africans. They sold Africans into slavery. African was not a term that was used back then. But African was not a term that was used back then. Why can't we just go, if we're going to learn the truth, right? Like, remember that movie, that Jack Nicholson movie? You can't handle the truth. Is it true? Is it true that you can't handle the truth? Because he was a what? The court ruled what? In 1670. What did the maps of Africa? That's a joke there, right there, because they didn't call it Africa. In 1670, they didn't call it Africa. They called it Ethiopia. Right? Ethiopia. This is the half of the story. Right? So in 1670, a court in 1670 did not rule that he was a black African. It didn't rule that he was an Angolan. It ruled that he was a Negro. And by consequence, an alien. I'm an alien, illegal alien. What's that song by Sting? What's his name from the Police? And the colony seized his land. But you know what they don't tell you about this particular, quote, black man, the Negro? What they don't tell you about Anthony Johnson is that he also owned white indentured servants. That's the part they haven't told you. They haven't told you that he owned white Indentured servant. In other words, he owned white slaves. Right? Anthony Johnson, right, is best documented black indentured servant. He worked off his term of servant. Notice the term indentured. Indentured servant. So how do you go from being an indentured servant to being a slave? What's the difference? So just when the writer chooses, well, right now I'm typing and let me, instead of slave, I'll say indentured servant. No, let me say, instead of indentured servant, let me say slave right here. Instead of saying African, no, I'll say black African. Instead of saying white American, I'll say American. You see how they do this, right? So this Anthony Johnson, he worked off his term of service and he married a free black woman. He owned 200 acres in MD, right? And had indentured servants. And even one African slave. Stop your lying. You mean one Negro. One Negro. Remember, this is the 1600s. This is back in the 1600s. Right? I'm going to prove it to you right here. We'll touch on the real truth behind black people owning black so-called slaves or servants. Black people buying black people, right? You know, and in that sense, having these black people as part of their estate, part of their thing, and not under the so-called white man, right? So he even, right? On what? He had one African slave, not African servant. He didn't have one African servant, African slave. So he was indentured servant and he worked off his term of service, but then he had one African. There was no such thing as the time. There was no such thing as an African in that 1600. They used the term Negro. Now they said his family later lost the land. Right? They probably had a beautiful piece of land. You know how they do with the law, right? Frame mischief by law, right? And maybe their freedom, they lost their land and their freedom when slavery became race-based by the end of the 1600s. But they don't tell you that he had white people, he had white slaves. They don't want to tell you that he had white slaves, right? Now, here's what's interesting, right? That looks like a picture, right? Like a picture. What did Anthony Johnson really look like? Right? Anthony Johnson, who apparently arrived in Virginia, apparently as a slave. So he arrived as a slave. He didn't arrive as a man. He arrived as a slave. He didn't arrive as a servant. He didn't arrive as a worker, as an employee. He arrived as a Slav. He was Slavic. He wasn't from Africa. He was Slavic. You know Slavic, like Yugoslavia? That's where Slav come from. I'm trying to peep you to something, right? But he arrived apparently as a slave, quote unquote, during the 1620s, obtained his freedom, right? By 1640s, he was the owner of slaves and of several hundred acres of land on VA's eastern shore. You don't say, right? Now, here's this interesting. This is an interesting case study. You can read over this right here, right? He purchased 250 acres of land in Virginia. He owned at least one slave and white indentured servants. Look what it said. He owned at least one slave. You mean they wasn't white slaves? You mean he didn't own white slaves? You see their pride? Their pride is so much. They wasn't white slaves. They were white indentured servants. Oh, okay, excuse me. Right? And one slave. But you can't call him an African slave. You know why? Because the term was not used back then. Now, this is an interesting one. According to conservatives, this is a 1654 photograph of America's first slave owner, a black man that's named Anthony Johnson. According to the people out there that want to push this stuff and all that, this is a 1654 photograph. 1654 photograph. Wow. 1654 photograph. Well, we wonder, how can you explain that the first camera wasn't invented until 1685? The first camera wasn't invented until 1685, but here we have a 1654 photograph. Curious, ain't it? And the first photograph, right, according to history, was not taken until 1814. Wait, so you're saying that the first photograph wasn't taken until 1814? And the camera wasn't invented until 1685. But here we have the first photograph from 1654 of America's first slave owner, so-called a black man named Anthony Johnson. Curious, ain't it? Very, very curious. That look when you're demanding reparations for black people and you find out America's first slave owner was a black man named Anthony Johnson. Wait. But he owned a black slave, an African slave, but they don't say about the indentured white folks. And who says that he was the first? So he basically, you're saying that he invented this slavery thing in America. That's what they're trying to say. That's what is implied right there. That face right there. All right. Well, let's just scroll through some of this right here. Go and get to our main exhibit. Right. Okay, let's go right here. So once upon a time, black slave owners sold black slaves to black tribes and the Arabs for thousands of years. Now, see, this term slavery is the next thing you have to strike down. You can't call those black people who were enslaved Africans, because African was not a terminology developed and used at the time. They were called Negroes. Negroes. Let's call them what they were. They were Negroes. This term slave, Slav, come from the European, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and it's linked with the Slavics. It's linked with actually something that black folks is said to have done to white folks back then. And now they come back now and do this to us, basically. Right? But what they're trying to say is that once upon a time, right, black people had owned black servants, and some of them maybe were bond servants, right? And they sold some of them to other black tribes, other tribes in the continent that they call today Africa, and also to the Arabs, the black Arabs, and also the pale red Arabs, for thousands of years, allegedly, right? 600 years into it, the Portuguese, the Spaniards, and the Americans, all the Gentiles, the Gentile nations, showed up and bought some too. The Americans bought about 1/5 of that, then later had a war over it and convinced dozens of other Gentile white nations, the Goyim, right, to stop as well, right? And then we get this picture right here, right? I think he's an African actor, right? Nowadays, we can use the term, right, Africans. But back then, no, we cannot, because that is confusing the timeline. The first American slave owner, see, now he's American, now he's full-fledged American, right, was black. And the last slave owners were a Native American tribe. Really? Really? Saith who? Saith the white man. Okay, of course. Also, the black slave trade throughout Africa and the Middle East continue even today, and absolutely nobody besides white Americans born hundreds of years later are condemned for absolutely anything in this post. The end. Oh, that was supposed to hurt our feelings. Oh, see, back then, right, as back now, millions of black people are still enslaved, right, by Arab, Muslims, by Arabs in that part of the world over there, you know what I'm saying? But the Democratic Party, the Donkeycrats, they'll never mention it because that would be awkward for them. Let's go on. Right? Okay. Our Muslims, white men invented the African. Now they say the Arabs, right, invented African slavery, and they want to say the white man abolished it. Oh, They abolished what? The white man didn't abolish Africans. If he did, he didn't do a good job, because it's still going on to this very day. So if you're black and you're not a slave, right, then thank Jah Rastafari. They say thank a white man. Thank a white man, any white man. You see this kind of crap? Okay, let's go on right here. Let's pass through this right here. Right? Let's pass through this right here. Right? See how they take a photo? You can steal it later on. right? Casualty killing act. Interesting right here. Oh, they love this picture. They show the white man strong with a whip in his hand, and the black man, he's like almost like feminized in a sense. You see that? Can you see it in a sense? Notice how they draw him right there. Almost like he had breastises. He almost looked like that. That's how the picture looks. Just art critique, right? Okay, okay. Here is how those posters went out. You see what it says? Does it say valuable gang of young Africans? It doesn't say valuable gang of young Africans. It says valuable gang of young Negroes by Josh A. Beard will be sold at auction, right? Wednesday the 25th, blah, 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 right? See that again? All right. So you believe that the Bible is true because the people that enslaved, raped, castrated, and lynched us said so. No. We know that the Bible is true because as we can read and study it for ourselves, we recognize how much the white man, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant lied, how much he lied about it, and how he could not practice, right, the better principles contained therein, right, how he lied about everything. He said Ham was cursed. It wasn't Ham that was cursed, it was Canaan. Now we get to find that the Canaanites probably are the originator, progenitor of the white man. How interesting. But the hardest chain to break is the one around your mind. They take the chains off our hands and feet and put them on your brain. Love that Rastafari tune right there. You can check this out. Check this out. We want to move this forward. Christians be like, I'm so blessed, right? And have a white sky juice, Kaiser Bogiers. Mental slavery is the worst form of enslavement, slavery. It gives you the illusion of freedom, makes you trust, love, and defend your downpresser while making an enemy of those who are trying to free you and open your eyes. Like this book right here, something I've been saying for a while, but somebody put it into print. Why we shouldn't call our ancestors slaves. Why we should not call them slaves. We've always said this for almost 20 plus years. Enslaved, or enslaved, all right? How did we become Christians today? Well, the good ship, Lollipop. No, that wasn't the name of it. That was Shirley Temple's tune right there. The good ship, U.S. Jesus. Right? We can look at this a little bit later. This was actually for a next vlog, a next video right here. Let's go through this. Can we really call ourselves free if we're still following the same religion that was forced on our ancestors? I would agree. Right? But we know that he took a lot of things, like he took our ancestors, he took the art and facts, he dug up ancient Egypt, dug up places, took, and he took this Bible, right, twisted it around, made his own thing. We take the fire back, right? Okay, ask the average student about slavery, and they think that only white people had slaves, right? In the 16th to 18th century, Africans enslaved 1.5 million white Europeans in the Barbary slave trade. For real? In the 16th to 18th century, now notice, in the 16th to 18th century, Africa was not called Africa. You get that, right? You check the maps for yourself. Check the dates of the maps. Who enslaved? Was it Ethiopians? Was it really Ethiopians? Since the continent was called Ethiopia from the 16th to 18th century, was it Ethiopians? Enslaved 1.5 million white Europeans? So that means they were black Europeans. See, they keep slipping with that. See, the emphasis caused them to slip. In the Barbary slave trade. Now, it's interesting. There's a military cadence song that talk about, from the shores of Iwo Jima to the Barbary and all of that. That's interesting. Whites were the first people to stop slavery in modern times. No. Were the first people? For real? Right? Whereas slavery still continues in Africa to this day. You know what's interesting? It's like you give with one hand, you take with the other hand, you throw the rock, and then you hide your hand. You know, so some white people, along with other people of other ethnicities, including black people, work together to try to curtail what they call the enslavement trade in the Americas. But then other white people working with even other black people, you know, and other peoples still go on and do it to this very day. Yes, it is a human so-called misconditioning, right? Okay, right here, just let you see that right there. We're gonna get through this. Let's get through this right here. Let's get through this right here. Let's get through this right here. This is an interesting picture, old picture of so-called European settlers fighting the Indians. Notice the Indians don't look like the white Indians of today. Look at this. Whoa, that's how the Indians looked? Is this how the Indians look? No wonder, what's his name? Not Abraham Lincoln. Who's the other guy? Benjamin Franklin said what he said, right? Right about the black continent, right? The black continent. Right. This is how it is, right? This is how it be, right? This is how it be. Make America's great again, right? Give it back to the native people, right? Negroes keep talking about getting back to African consciousness, right? The past, the present, slavery, right? And slavery right here. Okay, so here to our main point right here. Here's the main point of this. This is interesting right there, right? Okay, Oluda Equiano, right? Oluda Equiano, right? We're going to touch on this right here. They say the first slave. They say that he was the first slave. Now, others say that Anthony, that the drawing is, they say this is Anthony. Others say that the picture from the 1600s is Anthony. But remember, we showed you about the picture and the camera. Whites must be held accountable for slavery. Okay, the only open-minded presidents right here. Now, at the peak, right, let's just share this right here. At the peak of slavery in 1860, only 1.4% of Americans owned slaves, according to these statistics, right? Let's just read through it. What your history books doesn't tell you is that 3,000 blacks own a total of 20,000 slaves that same year. Okay. Right. Proud Southern, deplorable Southern rebel. If you're sick of race baiting, please like and share. Okay. But the reasons, there's very, credible reasons for certain black people, not all, some black people have the same bad spirit that some white people have, in brutalizing other human beings. But no doubt, many black people, right, bought, quote, so-called black people to have them, right, away from the white man's thing, and instead they be around black folks. So basically to free them. They don't tell you that right there. Pause on this right here and read over this right here. This is something we'd like to follow up on. This 9 facts about slavery they don't want you to know. Right? But they don't tell you. One fact about slavery is the word slavery and slaver and slave come from Slavic. Slavics were white folks that, according to some history, was enslaved by black people. So it's interesting that most people use terminology in their language for servant. A servant, right? And then you have a more brutal servitude is called bond servitude, bond servant, right? Bond servant. That's like bond servant equals, quote, slavery or slavery. But they don't like to give you those distinctions right there. Interesting about the 1765 revolt in Jamaica, where the slaves belonging to one Mr. Thomas Cook, late of Jamaica, rebelled and killed their master and a carpenter and robbed the house of everything that was valuable and fled to the woods a few days after they murdered 3 men in a small schooner, like a small boat. This was a letter to the governor of Jamaica, quoted in 13 chapters, right, of A History of Belize by Asad Shoman. Interesting, ain't it? Here's our point. When they keep telling us or want to tell us about Africans enslaved. No. Right? It was not Africans that were enslaved. It was Negroes. They never used the term African. Let's do something that's fun, right? Any of y'all, right? Maybe we should have some reward on it. Don't know what kind of reward we can give on it, right? But let's try a reward on it if we can, some sort of reward. If one can find one authentic billboard or one of these kind of things here you see right here, if one can find any authentic one that really even calls them Africans, right? Because here you see where they're called Negroes, right? Right, $1,250 to from $1,200 to $1,250 for Negroes, right? And we look at the maps, you see where they have a place they call Negro land on some of their maps. If you look at older maps, that part of Africa, what they call Africa, was called Lower Ethiopia or Ethiopia Inferior, Lower Ethiopia and Upper Ethiopia. The continent was called Ethiopia from like the 1600s, roughly like to the late 18, early 1900s. And all these billboards for the sale was for the sale of Negroes. Now, some people say, well, you know what they mean. You seem to be defending the cracker. You seem to be defending the slave master. You seem to be defending the down presser, right? We're just defending the facts here. The facts here say Negro. You see where it says Negro, 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 right? It says all over the place Negro, right? Negro. You don't see any place where it says, right? There's no place where it says African. If you can show me one of these billboards, and they have them going back over like almost 400 years, if you can show me one where it says, if it says African, like, so we decided to do this right here, right? Look at these posters. We're going to just go through it right here at a lively pace. And it says Guinea slaves. Either call them slaves, Slavs, or it calls them Negroes. There's not one of them that we've seen calling them African. So when we see this rewrite today, oh, black African, then they say black African, as though, was there a white African at the time? South Africa, the Afrikaners were not even there around that time. In other words, South Africa did not become what it has, been, and, it was not, right? It was not. Look over here. Let's scroll through over here. We're going to scroll through slowly and pause, and you can pause it right here, and you can see if you see African anywhere. Do you see African anywhere? Negro man, Negroes right here. It says Negroes right there, right? And Negroes again. Look, it says, they have one that says Negroes again. Negroes again. Land and Negroes for sale. Look, this one even says to be sold a black woman, right? A black woman, the one that has slavery in Canada, a black woman. It actually says black. We actually found one that says black, right? A black woman. Here it says Negroes for sale, right? Negroes for sale, Negroes for sale, Negroes, right? Here it says a likely Negro, Negroe, a likely Negro girl. Right? Negroes, Negro man, Negro here, Negro there, right? What do we see over here? Negroes, likely Negroes. This one says likely Negroes. How come it say likely Africans or likely Angolans? It don't use those terminologies. Don't let them fool you today. Because once they do that, they can change the goalposts. Once you believe that it was Africans, it was not Africans. African is a latter-day terminology that came into vogue around the 1900s, the late 1800s to early 1900s. Just like the trans-Ethiopic Ocean, right, was not called the Southern Atlantic Ocean. So therefore, 400 years ago, it could not be the transatlantic ocean slave trade. It must have been the trans-Ethiopian Ethiopian ocean slave trade, right? And once you begin to get that, you will begin to get the truth, right? As long as you try to argue around the facts, you're not going to know the truth. Right? You can't handle the truth, right? Negroes, Negro Humphrey. Here it says Negroes for sale. Negroes over here, Negroes for sale. Sale of slaves right there. Negroes, dealer in slaves. There's a dealer in slaves over here, right? So a Negro runaway Negroes, Negro for sale. Where's African? Can you show me one of them that says African? Right? One of them should say African. Shouldn't one of them at least say African? See, you know why you won't find one of them? A Negro woman, a Negro fellows. They said Negro fellows, Negro woman over here. You know why you won't find one of them to say African? because that's not the terminology. That's not the wording. That's not what we were called back then. See, it's important to understand that, and then to look at the maps. See, when you look at the maps, you say, oh, Negro land. I see it. Negro land. Right? The land was actually called by the white man then Negro land. So, in other words, if the land was still called Negro land, we could say we're from Negro land and we could look at the map. But you know what? They control all of that. They change the maps and you all believe them. Right? Then look at this one right here. It says about 40 years of age, supposed to be about 5 feet to 10 inches high, stout and strong, and not very black. Not very black. They say very black mark, black this. Okay, it says some black thing, but this one is not very black. What do they mean by that? He's not very black. Right? Negro men. Negro men wanted. I wish to hire immediately. What's that, $38 or 38 cents? What's that? It says will allow $17 per month. You know, new Negroes. Don't say new Negroes. Negroes wanted. Dealer in Negroes. Wow. Negroes for sale. Right? They say Bob is very black. Right? Straight made. Has holes though. Right? Has holes through the lower parts of his ears. Okay. Right? Then it says right here, whoever takes up said Negro. So they was using Negro and black. We see very clearly they use the terminology Negro. Look at this one here. Gold Coast Negroes just arrived in the brig Gambia. Now look what it says. Directly from Africa. You see that one over there? It says directly from. You notice that? Directly from Africa. They don't call them Africans, still saying a cargo of prime, healthy young Negroes. But this one here at least says from Africa, and it has Gambia. You see that? It says Gambia, Africa. Now we need to get the dating of this right here. This is from the Charleston Evening Gazette, the 28th of July, 1786. 1786. But nevertheless, they don't say Africans. They don't say Africans. Right? African wench. No, it said Negro wench. Negro wench, scanning through, just scanning through. Right? Negro. Right? That's who they were. It was not Africans. A strong, healthy Negro wench. So we want to find out, well, where did our people most likely come from? Right? We need to look at maps from that time. Look at some of the maps from that time and see what places correspond. We showed you one says Gambia, said Africa, right? We know there's a land called Negro land, right? And that Negro land before was called Lower Ethiopia. So before it was called Negro land, it was called Lower Ethiopia. New Negroes, right? You see Negroes. It says, this one says pagan. This is pagans or Fagan? Fagan. Okay, Fagan. I don't know, Fagan right here. It says Negro over there. New Negro. Mulatto. We have a mulatto woman. Interesting. Mulatto woman. We have a Negro notice. Right? Over here they say slaves. Right? Here it says, this day arrived from the westward coast of Africa. It does say Africa arrived. It didn't say Africans arrived, but arrived. And if we scroll down, it probably would say Negroes. Right? Because they love to do that. Right? That's how they were described at the time. And for one to do it differently, they would stand out like, why are you calling them Africans? They're not Africans, because Africans would imply like they're citizens, they belong to something. No, they kids came from this land. The land was, going through different name changes among the white folks. Right? 130 valuable Negroes, right? Prime slaves. Right? You see right here, it says a law. You see a law regarding Negroes and slaves is that in the nighttime? Get out of here. A law regarding Negroes and slaves in the nighttime. Wow. See what the Bible said, they frame mischief by a law. Right? So we're almost through here. We're just going through this. This is just a list of all these slave posters and everything. And we was looking at it because we saw a lot of this modern rewrite saying African, black African, like there's white African, African. I said, wait, I said that right there is cognitive dissonance. That's cognitive dissonance. They wasn't called Africans at the time. right? So how could we be calling them African? They were Negroes. They were identified as Negroes. So there's a tendency now to try to rewrite history. And this is where they try to fool us, try to make it seem it wasn't that bad. You know, it wasn't as bad. And even black people, they own, you know, those black man, the first slave owner was a black man. So, I mean, why you getting up so fast? We abolished it all by ourselves. White people abolished it all by their lonesome. Like all the white people rose up against who? Against other white people? But you had a whole civil war. Didn't they? Didn't they have a whole civil war where they had a lot of white on white violence, white on white killing that occurred because some white people, no doubt, were against it, right? But some white people were for it. Just like we look at the continent that they call Africa today, some black people over there sold other black people. Many of us see it as they sold the Hebrews and the Israelites, right? The other African tribes, the more Hamitic tribes sold the Shemitic tribes, both black folks. But that's another point, another vlog, hopefully for another day. Negroes. Look, all this Negro here, all this Negro. There's somebody named Nimrod. There's one man named Nimrod, $50 reward. They're trying to get Nimrod. Ain't that something? Nimrod was a Cushite. Remember a Cushite? He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, according to the Bible. Insurance of Negroes. Look at that. Insurance of Negroes. This is an insurance company. So the insurance company wasn't writing down insurance of Africans. It said insurance of Negroes because they knew better not to identify them like that. Right? Like, oh, we have a Gambian or we have an African or Ethiopian. No. They're not going to do it like that. A likely, look what it said, a likely Negro girl. Notice that they be saying these kind of strange things that make some of us think. A likely Negro girl. That means she's likely to be a Negro, but she might not be a Negro. What does that mean? Negroes sold on commission. My goodness. Slave dealers, Memphis, Tennessee, valuable slaves, not cheap slaves, but valuable slaves. You know, Negro lad, to be sold, a young Negro lad, right? Just running these ads, right? A Negro boy named Jack, They don't know Jack. Do you know Jack? A Negro boy, not African, runaway Negro, $50 reward. Not a runaway African, not a runaway Angolan, right? Not a runaway Ethiopian even, right? 2 Negroes over here, 2 Negroes, 10-pound reward, 10 pounds. Pounds, get that right there? That's 1780 something, 83. 10 likely Negroes. Can somebody tell us what does it mean, likely Negroes? That means you could be Negro, you might not be Negro. Right, on Thursday last, arrived from the coast of Africa, the Brigadier Royal Charlotte with a parcel of extremely fine, healthy, and limbed Gold Coast slaves. Gold Coast slaves. Notice, they never said African slaves. So what do people get? Oh, they sold all the Africans into slavery into America. No, they didn't. They sold Negroes. See, the evidence points to Negroes. See, if you keep it up, they're going to change up all of this. If you don't have copies of this, they're going to change up all of this. And after a while, you're going to see where it says African for sale. You know, they're going to do some stuff like that if they haven't been working on it as well, right? 10 likely Negroes consisting of men, women, and children, 1 valuable tract of land. They even give you a tract of land as well. You know, to graze your Negroes, of course, right? Right? Runaway Negroes. I think you'll get the point, right? You see the point right here? Can you show me where they even have that one where they have a particular Negro, right? Black man, Israelite, right? Hebrew, Jew, black Yehudi, right? Judahite, where they actually say that he reads Hebrew, a blind Negro who could read Hebrew. And even the Jews, the European Jews, they were amazed. How does he know Hebrew? And there's more stories like that as well. There's more testimonies of that. Okay, Negro man up here. We're almost at the fullness right here. Because we went down the whole page and we said, wait, they wasn't called Africans, a likely Negro girl. That means she's likely to be a Negro girl, maybe not a Negro girl. You never know. Runaway, a Negro man, right? He's a Negro man. right? All these ones, you just get to see it. Negroes for sale, about 50 likely Negroes, right? Some of these are repeats right here, but you get the basic idea right here, right? We're almost at the fullness right here. Just scrolling through some of these advertisements. A likely Negro lad, about 18 or 19 years old, works well at the Cooper's trade, right, and understands working in the field or garden. Esquire of the printer. That's interesting right there. Skills, right? Negro Humphrey, right? Negro Humphrey, right? Gamby. You see what they say, Gamby? Some of them do mention certain places like Gamby, but they often say from Africa. They often say from Africa, right? They often use that term from Africa, right? Even though we know that the maps, they finally got to change all the maps in the later part of the 18th, early part of the 19th century. So that means from the 1600s all the way to the late 1800s, it was known as Ethiopia. And then Ethiopia is in a different, like the whole continent, the central part. It's not the Ethiopia we talk about today, but they even had Lower Ethiopia, or Ethiopia Inferior and Ethiopia Superior. And where Ethiopia Inferior or Lower Ethiopia was, they later renamed that to be Negro land. See the connection? Negroes, Negro land, and that's West Africa. That's what they call West Africa, or more correctly, West Ethiopia, right? West Ethiopia, the ocean even. You finally got the fact checkers to check out the facts that we put out. A lot of people are trying to beat up the facts. We just ignore them. You know, we ignore them because we put up the facts. All you have to do is look up the facts. Now they have it. Well, yes, they did. It was known as the Ethiopian Ocean. You know, it wasn't known as the Atlantic Ocean. So what does that tell you? When they say trans-Ethiopian, when they say transatlantic, that's a lie. It was trans-Ethiopian Ocean. So that's why when we start to read some of their books, we see them kind of slipping up every now and then and making that link between the Ethiopians and the children of Israel, like Amos 9 and 7. Are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel? Right? Because Yahweh, hey, Yahweh, right? Jehovah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Baruch Hashem already knew that these things would happen. He said, are you not as the children of the Ethiopians? Because many of the black people over here recognize that link. Even in the Civil War, the British tried to get some of the blacks, you know, over here to fight on their behalf against their rebellious children who had got in a charter to come over here and do business, and then they broke away. You know, the white people broke away from the other white people in England, right? And they had that War of Independence, and during that time, the British was trying to get blacks to fight on their side and said, you can join the Ethiopian regiment, and many blacks did. So why would they use that term to appeal to the blacks? We're not going to. So the British were smart. They thought they were smart, clever, crafty. They said to the blacks, y'all are Ethiopians. And they said, oh, how you know? How you know that? They decide not to call them Negro, but to call them Ethiopian. And that now matches the historical data that Africa, right, center and also West Africa was known by the name Ethiopia. Ethiopia Superior, Ethiopia Inferior, Upper Ethiopia and Lower Ethiopia. West Africa was Lower Ethiopia, Ethiopia Inferior. Later on, they called it Negro land. So when the white man was trying to get some of the blacks over here to fight against the white people over here who were breaking away from the white people in England, right? Talking about they were slaves. Can you imagine that? The white man even talked about he was a slave because he had to pay taxes to the one that gave him permission to come over here to begin with. See how they are? Okay, let's go over here. Negroes for sale. I think this is getting writ large. You're getting this idea right here. Writ large, Negro for sale, right? Negroes and horses. 4 likely Negroes. Horses, hogs, cattle, corn, oats, rye, household and kitchen, furniture, and farming tools. My gosh. 4 likely Negroes, horses. Is it 4 likely horses? 4 likely hogs? No, it's 4 likely Negroes. It seemed like they had some doubt, right? Look at this right here. What's this? The Negroes and Indians, the Negroes and Indian advocate. Ain't that something? Well, since we already know that the original natives, over here in this America, they were dark skinned. There was dark skinned people that could be considered black as well, right? In fact, even some of their great writers, like what's his name, Benjamin Franklin, he talked all about that, and it's accurate what he said, right? Stop the runaways, stop the runaways. Right? They had one named Dinah. Ain't that something? Dinah, a wench. Right? Okay, Negroes, but so far you haven't seen them call them Africans. That's the point here, right? You don't see them calling them Africans, right? Interesting, on a few of them they call them black. That's what's interesting, or describe them as being black or not too black, right? Here it says black woman over here. Here it says these two say black woman right there, right? Some absconded. Some ran away. Two Negro men right here. They call them slaves and Negroes, slaves and Negroes, slaves and Negroes. No Africans, slaves and Negroes. Can you find one time African? Slaves and Negroes, no Africans, right? Negro wench for sale, right? Right. So if anybody just does any basic homework, if around this time from the 1600s to the late 1800s, this is what they were calling them, and then you look at the old maps from that time, and you see a place called Negro Land, right? And then you see the place before that on the older maps was called Ethiopia, Lower Ethiopia. You begin to scratch your head, would you? And can't you figure it out? Can't you go figure? Then you open the Bible to Amos 9 and 7. Are you not as the children of the Ethiopians of me, O children of Israel? Well, these are the Israelites. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Colored people. Uh-oh. Colored people. They have some black boy right there. Negro girl right there. Just scanning over, we have an eye for the Negro. Right? Eye for my people. Right? We gotta see this, and hopefully you can see this as well. You don't find African one time. Negro wench. Negro went. See, they try to play with us. The liberals try to play with us and say, oh, that term Negro is a pejorative. You don't want to be called Negro. You're Africans. No, 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 no. If we're Africans, right, then we need to get some African rights. I'm talking about rights over there. You know what I'm saying? All right. Right now, with the battle over here, let's keep them to the facts of the case. The facts of the case is that our people were called at the time Negroes and slaves and Negroes, sometimes referred to as being black, right? Sometimes those that committed, look at that, committed, wow, committed, okay, helped to win the war. I have removed my Negroes from Knoxville to Kingston, where they will remain until Friday or Saturday next. Ain't that something? He removed his Negroes. Wow. He didn't say he removed his Africans. Right? Freemen, right? There's a freeman. Wendell Phillips on learning to read and write. We got to grab that one right there, because reading and writing is very important, because some of our people are still functionally illiterate. Right? I mean, they could read, but not very well. That's one thing I advise all the brothers and sisters to do. Take some of those free courses. There's a lot of free courses out there. Don't have no shame in the game to learn to read. Right? Learn to read effectively. Right? Reading is very important. Once you learn to read, you can almost teach yourself almost anything if it's written about. Okay, so we see Negroes for sale here. Not one African. We don't see one African in the bunch. Right? Because maybe we just went through it too quickly. Maybe there was an African somewhere. There we go. It says, looks like you reached the end. Well, we're close to the end of the times of the Gentiles. So don't let them fool you, my people. Don't let them fool you. Don't let them change the goalposts, right? They were called Negroes for majority of those 400 years. It's only in the latter part of the 400 years that they started to change the paradigm because of a lot of the things that was going on, right, outside of America. You see, because they knew about stuff that was going on outside of America. We only knew about the news that they felt, was fit to print, right? And then we'll touch a little bit more on, black people owning black slaves. What was that really about, right? Because there's a lot of misleading disinformation out there. Check the description right here. Like, share, subscribe, brothers and sisters. Be sure to save this, back this up as well. We just try to be straight to the point, just to speak the evidence, right here, here. The truth is an offense, but it's not a sin. This is Rasiadonis Safari, the LOJ Society, the Lion of Judah Society. Check the links in the description. Yes, give thanks, and also give thanks to those who donate to this as well. Give thanks. Shalom.